Go
In
ahead.
3, 2, 1. Good morning, everyone. Good morning from the Philippines and good evening from the other side of the world, where our guest is currently at. He is a time traveler. That explains why he is from the past. I would like to greet everyone here to the Python Philippine webinar, a day in the life of a work from home Pythonista.
All right. So a day in the life of a work from home Pythonista is a monthly virtual webinar series talk show where we interview Pythonista representing various roles. So developer, CTO, data scientist, QA, network engineer, scientist, educator, and etc. So to give people in the community an insight of what a typical work day looks like for these various roles. So one of the goals of this webinar is to give this sense of community, provide some perspective, inspiration for most people who are working from home and lost in the social interaction for a while. Remember, we are in a pandemic season, so yeah.
But first, a word from our sponsors. Before we start, we would like to thank our sponsor, FactSet Philippines Incorporated, for making this show possible. They are a strong supporter of diversity and inclusion in their company. They're also hiring Python software engineers. Please do check their job listing at pythonph/jobs, which are put on the comments right now. Thank you, FactSet, for sponsoring our show. We wouldn't be able to do this without you. With that out of the way, I am one half of the host, Sony Valdez.
And yep, I am Ryan Ermita. And yeah, for our guest today, you probably hear his podcast while doing your walks or doing your commute. So yeah, without further ado, let's welcome Michael Kennedy. All right. Woohoo!
Hello, hello. Thank you.
Yeah. Right. For our viewers, who is Michael? So kindly introduce yourself, actually.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So, I've been a software developer for a long time. Originally, I was working on my PhD in math, and I decided I liked programming way more. And so I moved into that. And I've worked in C and C Sharp and JavaScript, but I'm doing only Python these days. I've been doing that for a long time. And I really love the community. I love the software. I love all the things about it. Just super time to be doing Python. I host two podcasts. I host Talk Python to Me, and I co-host Python Bytes with Brian Ocken. And I also am the founder of Talk Python Training, where we have about 210 hours of Python courses we built so far with a bunch of authors and so many other folks.
That's kind of interesting. Actually, when you did start using Python for hobbies or for as a career?
So I started using Python for an interesting reason, a little bit different than most people probably. I was doing software training and like professional development for software developers. So I would go travel around from wherever I was to some company and spend a week helping them get up to speed with new technology. And I moved from C# into Python. And so most of my early days of Python were around exploring, how does Python work internally? What are some of the best practices? And just trying to put together what are the lessons that people need to learn from it. So I kind of did it backwards. I learned Python, sort of teach it to other people. And then I took that and made a place in the world where I could go and make that my full-time job, where I write software in Python as well. So it's a little bit backwards, but yeah, I did that 2013, 2014, probably 2014, I would say.
Kind of pressure.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a kind of interesting journey. But it's in terms of the struggles on starting that kind of career. So what are your struggles towards more senior roles using Python or other technologies?
Yeah, sure. Well, there's a really interesting saying. There's this funny T-shirt that says, "I learned Python. It was a good weekend." Right? And people joke that it's so easy to learn. And here I am 7 years later, spending all day studying Python, talking to people about Python, using Python, and I'm still every day, all day learning Python. So which is it? Do you learn it in a weekend or do you learn it all the way? And so what I was going to say with that context, I think the challenges are, how do you move from I'm kind of getting started to going beyond and becoming like an expert? how do you learn this is the right way to do things, not just something that works, but this is the way you should do it, and here are the reasons why, and so on. So of course you can learn those. If you work in a team, maybe if you're lucky, there's people who are more experienced than you and good, people who are less experienced, and you can both be a mentor and a student within that environment. That would be great. A lot of people, they don't have that. I didn't really have that in my world most of the time. I was either the very newest person or the very most experienced person. And as you try to advance in your career, as you get more towards the very experienced person, you have to find other ways for you to learn and for you to explore. And I think a lot of that is things like this, like connecting with other people, going to meetups, going to conferences, putting yourself out there on the internet, and writing. All those types of things help you go beyond what you just do for the projects at work and become more of a senior person in whatever you're doing. But I think the big challenge is, as you get closer to that, there's fewer people to help you. So you need to reach out to find other communities and other groups and other people who are also at that stage who can help you.
Interesting. Actually, I think that's the inspiration why you started the public trainings and the podcast, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, the reason I started the podcast is sort of like this. I wanted to hear those conversations. I didn't want to just figure out how to use Flask. I wanted to talk to the person or hear from the person who created Flask. Why did they do it? Why did they create it this way and not follow what Django did? And those kinds of questions are like the deeper below the surface level knowledge. It's not just, well, in Flask, the way you do it is you say @app.route on the method. Like, no, why is it that way? How does it work? Is it faster? Is it just a better convention? Is it more testable? Like, what is really about it, right? And when you talk to the people and you hear those stories, you learn, why did they create it this way? What are the advantages? And I wanted to just listen to a podcast that had people like that. And when I was getting into Python, there was no podcast. They were not very common, or there was none. They had all stopped. And so I thought, well, if I want to hear these stories and find out these answers, I guess I'm going to have to start the podcast myself. And so that's why I got started. I originally just wanted to listen to the podcast, but I ended up starting one instead.
Yeah, it's kind of good to hear the rationales behind the why these solutions are. Why did the solution this way, right? The rationales.
Yeah.
And every solution, they always come at why, right?
Yes.
That's the core. So yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, and a really important lesson is sometimes the one solution is the perfect answer for somebody, and it's also the perfectly wrong answer for another person at the same time. For example, a complex Kubernetes cluster with zero downtime, that's a perfect solution for somebody like Google or a high traffic site. But somebody who's just trying to learn Python and get their first website up, they shouldn't be trying to juggle a Kubernetes cluster, right? That's the wrong answer if you're just trying to get started and you don't have a lot of users yet. So, you also got to know which is the right thing at the right time.
Correct. In terms of timing, because actually, with my previous experience, actually, some of the, for example, the code base, they are always kind of judging the way they write the code. But the way I see it is that they wrote that code with the information that they have at that time.
Yes,
right?
Exactly.
So
yeah,
that's kind of unfair to judge someone's code with the information that they have that time. So with our knowledge right now, we can make it better. So I think that's currently the technology works really more on the iteration and innovation. So
yeah,
that's
I'm a big fan of refactoring. I'm a big fan of tools that help you understand, like, oh, this could be better. For example, Sorcery is a cool plugin for PyCharm and VS Code. And I learned some things about Python just a couple of weeks ago by having to analyze my entire code base. I'm like, you can write it that simple? I didn't I had no idea. It's really amazing to just kind of keep learning. But, you don't have to write it perfectly. You just make it better with tools and iteration and as you add features and experience.
Yeah, correct. Actually, you are doing a lot, right? Of public training, podcasts, and learning kinds of stuff. So how do you protect your time so you won't be distracted by other outside factors, for example?
Yeah, that's such a good question, and it's so hard, right? I think for some people maybe it's not too difficult, but for me it's incredibly hard and it's constantly frustrating. I've tried different things. The reason it's hard for me is I'm trying to write courses, like right now I'm in the middle of writing a course, those take a month and a half of time to just write and create and produce them. But at the same time, I'm also trying to run my online course business, which has a lot of customer support, accounting, that kind of stuff. I'm trying to work with the authors who are also writing courses. I'm trying to be the researcher and the scheduler for the podcast, and all these people send me messages and need something from me, which is great, but it's also really hard for my time. So I talked to this guy named Eugene on the podcast on Talk Python recently, and he introduced me to this idea that I really like, and I found it to be extremely useful. I think it was Mark Andreessen who originally said it, but it was basically said there are people who live on maker schedules and there are people that live on manager schedules. And if you live on a manager schedule, your job is to look at your calendar and find all the spots, and then you meet with people, you talk with people, you build partnerships, and that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. If you're on a maker schedule, like a software developer, you need 4 or 5 hours of uninterrupted time to do that big refactoring before you get interrupted. And the way I think that Mark Andreessen was talking about it is, those different groups of people work in the same company, and the manager people can often interrupt the developer type folks in ways that actually wreck their productivity. It was primarily the takeaway, but that's not the way that I saw it. Like as I described, I have kind of multiple job roles that I have to do. I have to kind of be a manager and an accountant and work on the business some of the time. And then some other times I write software or write courses. So what I do is I actually have in my calendar 2 days that are at the top. It says Maker Day, and that blocks out my calendar for the whole day. Nobody can put an appointment on that day. I don't go anywhere on that day. I don't meet people on that day. I don't do podcast recording. Those days, Tuesday and Friday, by the way, Tuesday and Friday, I will not meet with anyone. I will not even have to set my alarm. I can get up really early. I can stay up late. It doesn't matter. Those are my days to just work as best as I can, uninterrupted, head down, working hard. The other days get packed full of meetings and recordings and other types of things. So I've taken this problem that I think a lot of people have, that you have to both live sometimes in this manager schedule and sometimes in this maker schedule. And I made sure they are on separate days. And I have either days with lots of meetings or days with 0 meetings.
Yeah, actually,
In that case, thank you, Michael, for giving the Friday to us. I believe.
Yes, absolutely. Well, it's it's like 8 o'clock at night on Friday, so we're good. It's definitely after even the maker time, no problem.
Fair enough. So we have chats on YouTube. So developer Steve Kuchin, apologize if I mispronounce, said, "Nice Python weekend T-shirt."
Oh yeah.
Believe that's the T-shirt that you're wearing.
Yeah, the T-shirt name. Yeah, that's pretty cool, right? That I learned Python. It was a cool, a nice weekend or something like that. That's right.
And we have another question from Anton Mon. If I am a newbie and no knowledge in programming, what do I need to prepare to learn Python?
I think there's a couple of steps. First, you just need to know the syntax, right? You need to be able to say, here's a function, here's a loop, here's a variable. That's the really beginning. And you can learn that. That's kind of what the weekend T-shirt joke was about, right? The language is pretty simple. Probably it's not really a weekend. It's probably a couple of weeks or something like that. And then you need to learn some of the internal pieces of Python that are important. For example, how do you work with files? How do I work with JSON files? How do I work with text files? How do I use some of the common data structures? What is a dictionary versus a list versus a set? And when do I use which? Knowing those types of small building blocks are really important. But then I would pick some kind of project that is not super advanced. You don't want to try to say, well, I'm going to recreate, this 3D game, right? Or something like that's too much, but something small that you can approach and try to build it. Instead of saying, I'm going to try to learn all of Python, say, I'm going to learn enough Python to build that thing and come up with something concrete on the other side that you're going to build. Like I said, I've been doing Python for a long time. There are plenty of parts of Python internals I don't know anything about. I couldn't work with them. I couldn't do them off the top of my head. There's weird things for converting colors and CSVs. There's meta classes. There's all kinds of stuff in there that I have no reason to ever work with. So don't try to learn all of those things. Try to learn some concrete path that gets you there. And then finally, as you grow, create a GitHub account, start putting stuff up there, start building a portfolio, because in programming, the most important thing in terms of jobs and progression and so on is somebody's going to say, well, what can you do and what have you done? And if you have an example, things you've done on GitHub and other places, you can say, I built that, that, and that. That will go a long ways towards helping you, maybe even more than a CS degree. Who knows?
Thank you. The questions are coming in from chat. So next question is Vani Bermudez. How does Michael protect his maker schedule, especially when the boss always calls you?
It's the boss.
Well, yeah, it does help that I'm the boss. So since I own my own company, I can just decide this is how it's going to be. Now, that's not completely without consequences. My other days are brutal because I have so many meetings and stuff. Like there are actual trade-offs, but I can make them for me. So that's a little unfair. But what I would do is I would look for that. I could probably find it for you. I would look for that maker manager schedule article. Yeah, it's called Maker Schedule Manager Schedule by Paul Graham. Sorry, I said Mark Andreesowitz. Sorry about that. It's Paul Graham who had said this. So here, I'll put that in.
We'll share that.
Yeah, there you go. I'll put that into the YouTube for you all there. All right. So I would share that with my manager and say, look, I know that we need to find this blend of time. As software developers, you have to work with the manager. You have to help them understand what you're building and understand what they need you to build. And you need to work with your teammates and so on. But at the same time, you need these blocks of time. So I would just help them understand that it's important. And I think conceptualizing this idea is really valuable, to just know, oh, there's a way to describe this part of my work and that part of my work. And they both have value, but they are not compatible in some ways. So you can sort of do them at different times and not try to do them at the same time.
Hey, thank you. And there's another question. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, go ahead. It's great.
All right. There's another question from developer Steve. Love the Maker Day idea. What things did you learn in the last Maker session?
In my last Maker session, I've been working on a new course. One of my popular courses is called Mastering PyCharm. It's getting a little bit old, so I've sort of redoing the research there and rethinking like what's important about all the tools that we get to use. And so I've been doing like recording and editing and studio work and all that kind of stuff. So that's what I did on my last Maker Day, which was today.
Okay, there's no more question from the audience, although I expect more to come in. It's still early in the day.
It's still early for us.
Yes, it's always early somewhere.
Yeah. So yeah, that you're doing a lot of trainings, podcasts. So and in our time right now during pandemic, so how do you deal with the burnout or feeling stressed out with the pandemic?
It's interesting. I was fairly nervous about the pandemic. I have 3 kids. I don't want me or my wife to get sick and the kids to be left alone. Of course, that would be really bad. But with that said, I have not had to deal with burnout. I've been working from home for a long time. I've been working from home since 2006 exclusively, before I started my own company in 2015. So I've had lots of experience working from home, and just the pandemic has really not been very different for me. So the things that changed is I used to love to go to coffee shops, and I'd go work at a cafe and just get out of my space, just go be somewhere else, or go to a library or something like that. It's been harder. Those things are starting to come back, but those are the challenges that I've had to deal with. Obviously, I was concerned, what is the pandemic going to do to the economy, to the business, to the podcast and its sponsors, to the courses and the people who both want to write courses or the people who want to take courses. There's a lot of things to figure out, but I never really had to deal with burnout. And I think one, that's because I was very lucky. And then 2, I've been working from home for a long time. So it wasn't much of a difference for me.
Yeah, in terms of work from home. So can you share us your hacks or productivity tools for to you use for efficiency work from home actually? So I think this is
Yeah.
a good time for work from home tour, right?
Oh yeah,
So yeah.
sure. I'll give you a couple quick ideas on some hacks, and then I'll do the work from home tour, show you the setup.
Right.
A lot of people say what you need to do when you work from home is you need to set a strict schedule. And this might work for you. If it doesn't, this is not a criticism, but it doesn't work for me so well. Is you need to make sure you get up at 8 o'clock and you do your work, and then you're done at 5 o'clock. Because if you don't do that, what's going to happen is you're going to slowly work till 5:30 until 6, and then it's just going to be like your whole life becomes work. And I decided to change that around and say, well, if all I need to do is get my work done during the day, maybe I can have a lot more breaks. So maybe I get up at 8 and I work for 3 hours, and then I go and take my dog for a walk, and then I'll work for 2 more hours. Then maybe I'll ride my motorcycle down to the coffee shop with my backpack, and then I'll work there for a while. And then I got to pick up my daughter from school. So I'll come back, drop that off, pick her up from school, and then we'll, just do something different in the afternoon. And then I might work from 8 till 11 at night. So my hack has been to say, don't make yourself just sit at the desk the whole time, even when you're tired and you don't want to do it. If you don't want to do it, go do something else. Just come back later when you're feeling more like working on it again. So I try to break up my day instead of trying to say it has to be 9 to 5, like a lot of people do. I guess that's probably the hack. It works for some people, not others. It depends on if you have a bunch of other people that depend on you being around all the time, how much flexibility you have, so on. All right, should I do my work from home tour? Are you ready?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, just give me the screen share ability and I'll fire it up. You can get a little bit of a work from home tour right here, this little bit. All right, looks good. Let's share this. How's that look? Is that coming through okay?
Yep.
Awesome. All right, so here is the Michael's I striked out home office because, as I said, I've been working from home for 15, 16 years. So this is my office. But also I do, as I said, try to go to coffee shops and libraries. And when it's not a pandemic, try to mix it up so I'm not just here. All right, so here's the quick tour. I'll set the stage. We got this house. The house had a garage, and above the garage, it had this empty structure. So there was just the wood to support the walls. There was no floors. There was no insulation, nothing. And that's where I am. We actually had that finished off. So I have this place that's separate from the house. So it's super cool that I can kind of be over here and not get interrupted. All right. So here's a picture from if you were to go back there and take a picture this way. So this is what my little work area I'm sitting at looks like. So some of it's for work. Some of it's for play. One of my hobbies is I'm into competitive sim racing, like single seat car sim racing, and then also go-kart racing and stuff like that. So that's over there. It happens to be in the picture, but it's not what we're going to talk about, although it is pretty fun. So we focus in on this. Here's where I'm sitting right now, looking at you. I'm looking at you in that little white camera at the top there. So what's interesting? What jumps out here? So there's some interesting things here. One, even in the pandemic, I have my backpack here. Notice that it's got a little white cable going in to be plugged, so my laptop is charged. So I have a laptop and a keyboard and a mouse in there. And whenever I get tired of being in my office, I just grab that thing and I go somewhere else. I don't have to pack it up or think about it. It's ready to go. So I can go to the cafe. I can go work outside at the table outside. Whatever it is, it's good to go. Also, I have a very uncomfortable chair, which is very strange because people talk about, oh, I got this Arion chair and it's so amazing and it's so soft. And because I do a lot of video and audio recording, the chairs that recline a lot, they make squeaky noises, which then get into the podcast. And then also, if your head moves back and forward on these microphones, it gets really quiet and loud. So I have a chair that cannot move. So it makes me sit right here by the camera and I don't move. So actually, I love having an uncomfortable chair. It makes it so much easier. And also noise cancellation, because so much of my job is podcasting, live streaming, course recording, and so on, that I've set up this sort of noise dampening thing because it's very echoey up here. All right, so that's one thing. Computer, I'm running the Apple Mac Mini M1, best computer I've ever had. This thing is a beast. It is so awesome. So I've been using that since December, I guess. I really, really love that computer. Not very expensive, but quite fast. This thing is comparable to the Sim Alienware computer that you saw on the first screenshot. Also got a couple of cameras. So this camera is obvious. This camera is less obvious. So up here, this is just a Logitech Stream Cam, which is cool. That's the one I'm talking to you on now. But I also have my iPad Pro. The iPad Pro has a nice like iPhone 12 type camera. And there's a really cool software called Camo. And you can get Camo for Mac and PC, and that'll take that camera and turn it into a super HD cam that you can use for, you know, like higher level video production, recording type stuff. So I use that as well if I'm doing like studio work or something like that. That's pretty cool. Let's see. Monitor, not a lot to say. 4K monitor. If you don't have a 4K monitor, you owe it to yourself to get one. They are so incredible. And this was like $350, but it's still beautiful. This actually makes it harder to go to the cafe, to the coffee shop, to the library, because I don't get to take my 32-inch 4K monitor with me. Talking to you now, I have a bunch of cool audio gear, of course, because I do all this recording. And before I tell you about this, I just want to throw out this comment. You know, people talk about Zoom fatigue and being tired of being in all these virtual online meetings. And I don't think that people are actually tired of Zoom. I don't think they're actually tired of online meetings. What they're tired of is hearing people that sound horrible with a bad microphone scratching on them that you can you're like straining to hear what they say. You're like, what is that? Could you say that again? Why is there an echo? I hear you 3 times. And then like you have a really bad camera and it's super dark and you can't see them. I think people are tired of that. And it used to be if you go to work, you'd get a suit and a tie and you dress up good. The new dressing up good is sounding good and looking okay in an online meeting, right? People are like, oh, I'd love to have Michael in the meeting. He doesn't sound horrible. That's fantastic. All right, so audio gear, I use this for meetings as well. But so I have this Focus 2i2, which takes the professional microphone stuff. And then I have this microphone here, but you can put like nice $70 microphones in there and get really good results. Input, I have a mouse and a trackpad, and check out this mouse pad. This giant black thing is all a mouse pad, because why should you have a little tiny square mouse pad when you could have your whole desk be a mouse pad? It's fantastic. I don't know why it took me so long to discover that, but that's glorious. And then I also really like having the touchpad hooked up to the computer as well as the mouse. And here's another cool little hack that you can check out. The mouse, I don't really do any gaming on this computer or care about that, but it's a gaming mouse because it has twice the resolution, which means it's more accurate as you're moving around the screen, and it just has more detail. So that turns out to be really good. Keyboard, I absolutely recommend that you get an ergonomic keyboard. If you're young, do it early before your hands start to hurt, or you get RSI, or you get something, and you'll be protected. And if you're having trouble, this is the Microsoft Sculpt Ergonomic. There's all sorts of different ones you can get, but get a nice keyboard that is twisted, that's not going to give you carpal tunnel syndrome. You want to be doing this computer stuff for a long time. All right, finally, lighting. So I actually have it turned up a little bit too bright for the dark evening, but whatever. I have my lights on here, and that's really good for recording, but it's also just good for meetings that people can see your face. If the sun were out, it wouldn't be so bright. By the way, I have 2 of those for like $40. They plug into the USB. That's how they're powered. So just plug them into my USB hub, and there they are. And then I have a green screen. I don't have it up right now, but I have that hanging up there for if I'm doing like live stream. And look how horrible that thing looks. It's like a $15 ripped up piece of green screen, but that's all you need. You can just hang it from the ceiling on these little wires, and then you get really good output that looks like a studio, even though I have $40 lights and a folded up green screen. So I think that's my iPad as well, the iPad camera. Anyway, let's see. Finally, if you look outside, I live in the Pacific Northwest. There's lots of trees and stuff. So this is the view out the window that way. If you look out there, pretty fun. Always nice to have the windows open, except for right now where it's really hot. And then finally, I decided to put something interesting behind me there. So when people talk to me, they're like, what are those things on the wall? Those things are outlines of popular racetracks around the world. So there's like Watkins Glen and what else is up there? Road America, Road Atlanta, all those different things. So these are the racetracks that I've competed on and I know well. And so they go up there if I've like spent some time competing on them. Anyway, I try to have a conversation starter in the back. Yeah. And I think that's it. Yeah, that's it for my tour.
I thought it's a map of somewhere else. Yeah, and actually the chair, the comfortable chair, I think it forces us to stand up, right, to take a rest.
That's a really good point. It does force you to stand up. It doesn't let you slouch and have bad posture. You have to sit up. And then I have the pillow thing is really comfortable, so that's okay.
Yes. And the look outside, actually, the nature, it's kind of balance the thing between work and the nature, right?
Yes,
so
exactly.
if you're stuck on the problem, so just think outside.
Exactly. Grab my backpack, go sit outside in this little table I have, and just be out in the trees and try to change the way I think about whatever it is.
Yeah, I think we have some questions.
Yes.
Okay.
Sony?
So Ivan Dominic Badios asks, aren't your lights too bright right now, or do you have too much?
Yeah, they are. Actually, what it is the camera. I have an adjustment to change the camera. So when I do streaming in the daytime, so the real problem is the lights are not too bright. It's that the exposure is too long on the camera. But I don't want to mess with it because I just jumped on the call and so yeah, it's the lights are okay. It's the exposure time on the camera is too long.
So do you?
Because I do look pretty bright right here. I know. I realize that.
Do you have any tips on minimizing the glare from your lights?
Not really. It's bad. I mean, if I didn't have glasses, it'd be no problem. But if you have glasses, I mean, you could see like right here, I have the lights on for this. And yeah, there's glare. The farther you can put them to the side and less straight in front of you, I think is the better. But then if you move it too far, then the light looks weird on your face. So this is something I can't figure out. I think you need maybe these bigger, softer, like really big lights, but it just doesn't work for my space to have huge lights. And I don't need the camera to be that good. It's just a live stream. It's okay.
Another question is from Anton Mon. What is the meaning of conversation starter in the picture?
Oh, yeah. So when I meet people all the time who I don't know. And I meet them on Zoom or on StreamYard or something like that. I'm either meeting them for the podcast or I'm meeting them for some kind of business deal around the courses or something like that. And I used to just have a blank white wall behind me. And I'm like, I'm going to put something up there that is interesting that people could go, oh, what is that? And we could, before we have a real conversation, we can just talk about silly things like, what are those little shapes on your wall? And we can talk about things like that. And then we can talk about like, okay, well, so you want to buy this course for your team? Like, let's get down to business, but it allows you to have like simple conversations that don't matter.
Yeah, conversation that doesn't matter, right?
Yes.
Anyways,
and we need those now, right? We need breaks
Okay.
like that now.
Another question coming from Cyber Fidelity. How many hours does Michael look at the computer before taking a break? And how long does your break take?
That's a good question. It depends what I'm doing. If I'm doing email, maybe 30 minutes, 45 minutes is all I can take. And I got to just get up and get away because that just wears me out. But if I'm trying to do programming and I'm like deep within a problem, or I'm writing a course and I'm like deep within building something and I get lost in it, it could be 3 or 4 hours and I jump up like, whoa, I'm really hungry. Why didn't I notice that? You know what I mean? So it really depends on the type of work that I'm doing. But then if I take a break, I try to walk away for 10, 15 minutes at least, or change my location and just keep going.
Another question. Apologies, the questions keep coming.
Yeah, keep going. It's all good.
Cookie Yomenai asked, from a developer's role, how do you position yourself as an entrepreneur?
As a developer, how do you position yourself as an entrepreneur? I think this is really interesting. It's something I think so many developers think about because we look at the stuff our world is built out of. And often you can say, that's not that hard. I could probably build that. And you have some idea that something doesn't exist. And you're like, I really want to build that because it doesn't exist. And I know that I can. And so the challenge of those things often isn't the actual building of the thing. The challenge is the marketing, the awareness, right? Like if you were to build a competitor to Facebook, well, how do you also get people to use that, right? I mean, not now, maybe when Facebook was competing with MySpace or something like that, right? How do you get the awareness? And that's one of the big challenges that you got to think about is, not just how do I build something, but how do I connect with the people who need this thing, and how do I break out above the noise? For me, it was create an audience with the podcast and build something that they already loved and that they trusted me for, and try to keep that trust by building something else, and say, for example, courses as well. But also, the podcast itself gets sponsored from other companies, so in a sense, it's kind of its own direct thing as well. But the really important part is, how am I going to get people to know about this, and how am I going to get them to use it? A lot of things people dream of have to have network effects. Like a social network is super boring if you're the only one who uses it, but other things don't matter, right? If you're building a video game that's not multiplayer, you only need one person for that person to enjoy it, right? So you got to think about, how am I going to get people to participate in it?
All right. Reminder for everybody on the YouTube comments, just ask questions on the comments and we'll ask that later. Okay.
You have any questions, Sony?
Not
Or
right now. I expect more later.
all right, all right, all right. So yeah, in terms of actually, um, okay, regarding the projects that you are doing. So what are the typical life cycle of those projects for you
Sure.
actually?
Yeah, sure. Some of them are really, really long, and some of them are shorter. So some of the projects I've done recently, there's the whole podcast side of things where I've created that platform. There's the course delivery stuff. The Talk Python training infrastructure is pretty complicated. We've got like 8 servers. We do about $1,000 worth of bandwidth through AWS. We've like a bunch of different servers throughout the world. So it's pretty interesting, that stuff. So those projects are like ongoing. But then I have smaller projects. Like we created a set of mobile apps for the courses, for the students to take the courses with. And that was maybe a 2-month project. Whenever I create one of these courses, that's a certain project, maybe adding features to our existing infrastructure as well. And then there's a bunch of really small little things like, I need to automate this stuff about our accounting. So let's go write some Python script that now turns what used to be copying stuff from here and then over into some spreadsheets and doing some work on it, turn that into a command line thing that just does that and gives us the answer, stuff like that. Those are the types of projects that I work on. I do sometimes work with other people, other developers on those projects, like the mobile app one. I had a guy working on that one. I had some security stuff I worked with another person on. Whenever we're doing courses, of course, there's many times other authors we're working together on. But we don't have a real traditional like sprint agile style. I would say it's more for things like the mobile apps. It was pretty clear, like, okay, let's get something we can test out and ship and see it's working, and then let's see how we need to make it better and go through different iterations. That's kind of close to a sprint type of thing, but often it's more focused, right? Like, I don't know, maybe story driven is the way, like, okay, we need to have this functionality. Let's work on that for a couple of days till we have it. Yeah, that's it. There's not as much team dynamics. Like I said, there are probably about 10 people involved in various ways on various things. But a lot of those are separated. Like I have people that do video editing. I have people that do audio editing, but I don't generally audio edit with them. I'll give them the stuff in a decent shape and they'll give it back to me better. But then there's some software sort of coordination bits.
So when you're starting in engineering side of things, have you tried also pro bono projects, for example? So how do you manage the manage ones and from the pro bono ones?
Yeah. Well, when I started, I was just really excited to have the chance to work on anything. And the projects were small and I didn't get paid a lot, but it didn't matter because I was so excited. I'm like, they're going to pay me even if it was, $10 an hour. So they're going to pay me to work on software. Can you believe it? I'm doing it. So that was really great. I think for me, the balance, I don't work exactly for a salary. I don't have a salary. I just, the money comes into the business if it's successful, and it doesn't if it's not. And so it's more, where am I going to spend my time in a less charged by the hour sense. So for example, maybe I'm creating a course, but as part of that course, there's a really cool opportunity to create like an open source library that I could create for the world and give it away and make it interesting. But it makes the course more valuable because, oh, look, here's the course and here's the open source library we created during the course, so you can keep using that. So is that pro bono? Is that paid? Like, I don't really know, but I do try to spend some time on creating things like that are just open for the community. Sometimes that's just content, like stuff on YouTube. Sometimes it's open source things, but then I also want to try to balance that with creating courses or adding features to make running the business easier. And the way I balance it, if I've gone too long without doing one of them, I'm like, I should probably do one of those because it's been a month since I wrote a course. So I should probably put this stuff that's really distracting me aside and try to work on that, and vice versa, right? If I let the business go too long, then it's going to be a problem, right? So I kind of just spread my time around to what I feel like needs it.
Yeah, and finding that balance is really hard, right? It takes
It's
time
really
and
hard.
practice.
And it's not like there's a company that says, Michael, your job is to focus on this for the next 6 months. Like, I get it. The benefit is I get to work on whatever I want. But the drawback is if I work on the wrong thing, then I'm wasting my time and just, I don't really know it for a long time. So it's also a challenge that way.
Correct. I think
Another
Sony have a
question
question. Okay.
Yes, another question from chat. Developer Steve asks, what was Michael's first coding computer?
My first coding computer. Okay. I'm trying to think. I believe it was a Pentium 90. Oh, yeah. So Pentium 90 was the very first one, but really quickly, I told you I used to study math, and I then started doing programming and realized, oh, I prefer this programming stuff after a little while. What had happened was I had taken some courses and done like a little bit of learning type of programming on my Pentium 90, but then got into this research project on a silicon graphics mainframe supercomputer type thing, mainframe. And so it was this Onyx silicon graphics workstation and some huge silicon graphics thing in a closet somewhere. It was really that and Emacs and C++ and OpenGL. And yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Another questions. Cyber Fidelity asks, does your online courses, Talk Python training, do you have certificates?
We don't really have certificates. I looked at setting up some automation with some companies, but their APIs were so unstable, they kept crashing our site trying to work with them because they would crash themselves and things wouldn't go. So I stopped actually offering certificates. But I know some people need them for like work. So if somebody's like, if I take this course and I get a certificate, the company will reimburse me. We do it for that, but we don't do like automatically posting it to your LinkedIn and stuff, which would be cool. I'd like to do it, but it's, there's a big list of things I need to work on, and the certificates is like number 3 or 4. So that's just the way it goes. But yeah, if people need it for work, I can get them.
Okay. We only have time for one last question from chat.
Okay.
If anybody wants to ask one last question, now's your time. There is delay on YouTube, of course. So
yeah, no problem.
Right, do you have any question that you didn't ask?
None as of the moment, but I think while waiting for that last question, I think it's a good time for Michael to plug some of his work, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. I really, the thing I think people can most connect with is the Talk Python to Me podcast, right? It's 100% free. It's available everywhere. Just subscribe to it into your podcast player. I try to tell all these stories that I wish we all could have. All right. Like I said about Flask, I just interviewed David Lord and Philip on the Flask and Court teams about their transition to Flask 2, what's important in Flask 2, why they did it and stuff, things like that. So if you're really interested in that, check it out. Also interviewed some people about astrophysics and black holes. Had some folks from F1 come on and talk about how they're using Python for the Formula One cars, and also from the top NASCAR team in the US. Two different shows, but they both seem to do really similar stuff with Python, like moving from MATLAB and Excel and like just making stuff better with Python. So if all those things sound interesting to you, come check them out at talkpython.fm. And also there are courses there. Click the course button if you're interested, but start with the podcast.
Okay.
Right.
We only have time for one last question, and the lucky person to ask is Cookie Yomenai. What do you prefer, teaching or developing?
Oh, wow. That's a really good question, Cookie. Thank you. So I'm going to go with development, but barely. And here's why. So when I was studying math, one of the big paths would be teaching, right? And I was actually teaching at the universities here in the United States for people who are doing calculus and stuff like that. And I really, really loved teaching, but it feels really great to build things and have people use the things that you build. And I thought, well, I can either go into programming and give up this teaching thing and build stuff that's going to be awesome, or I can teach people but not really build things. And what I found was you can kind of do both. So you can build things, you can be a software developer, and you don't have to have like a podcast or something. You can go speak at a meetup. You can do a brown bag presentation at your company. You can still be a teacher about the things that you're really passionate about, but also be a builder. And I think that that's actually super awesome. It really surprised me about my path is that I went down this programming path, but I also got into speaking and teaching and stuff. So I do like building more than teaching, but I don't really think that they're as separate as a lot of people see them as.
All right. I think that's the last question for us, right? So, and Sony, anything on your end?
Okay, so we are now almost done. And before we go, this webinar wouldn't be possible without the help from our sponsors. If you want to be a sponsor, you can contact us at info@python.ph, or you can drop by to our Slacks and you then ask around. And one of our people would go and contact you. And now, before we go, I would like to give a shout out to all the commenters that is on YouTube right now. So shout out to developer Steve Kutsin, Creative Codesmith, Anton Mon, Vani Bermudez, Ans, Tiara Bautista, Jerem.me, Zolet Sarbo, Ivan Dominic Badio, Cyber Fidelity, and Cookie Yumenai. That this webinar wouldn't be fun without the questions coming from you. And so as we end the webinar, everybody, don't forget to like, share, and hit that notification bell to get notified of new episodes.
Yes. And remember, always have in your heart in this line from a son of Python, simple is better than complex. Goodbye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for being here.
Right.
And cut.